My sister chose our grandfather, not our father, to walk her down the aisle after many years of neglect from both of our parents. I am 35 years old. I have a 23-year-old brother and a 29-year-old sister. Our parents are extremely religious and conservative. When we were growing up, they really wanted a son and were overly disappointed when I and my sister were born. I was their first child. When they found out they were expecting a girl, they even thought about not keeping me. But because of their religious beliefs, they decided to keep the pregnancy. My grandmother told me that when I was only 2 years old, my mother sent me to her because being around me made her depressed. Childhood with Grandma and Grandpa was wonderful. Grandpa patiently taught me to ride a bike. I still remember the thrill of riding on my own for the first time. Those days spent learning to ride a bike created a strong bond between us that lasted for many years. Grandma taught me gardening. I learned how to care for plants, watch flowers bloom, and enjoy a small corner of nature. Skills that she passed on to me during our gardening sessions help me to this day. My parents never visited me until I turned 7, and people around began to wonder why I didn't live with them. They took me away from Grandma and Grandpa despite my protests. I would have happily continued living with them because they gave me stability and warmth. 3 years later, our parents were over the moon when they found out they were expecting another child. However, when they learned it was another girl, they again felt disappointment. This time, they were a little calmer than during the first pregnancy. Luckily, my sister did not have to go through what I went through, and she grew up with our parents. The difference in how they treated me and my sister was very noticeable. For example, I was expected to help my mother with many household chores and duties. It was an endless list of tasks that I had to do to meet their expectations. However, when it came to my sister, the rules were much softer. She did not face the same pressure, and our parents were more lenient with her responsibilities. It seemed they had learned from their first parenting experience and decided to change their approach with her. Another example was our education. When I went to school, I was under huge pressure to excel in every subject. My parents had high expectations of me, and any deviation from perfect grades caused them disappointment. They enrolled me in various extracurricular activities, trying to make me the best in everything. In contrast, when my sister started school, the atmosphere for her was much more relaxed. Although our parents still cared about her education, the level of strictness was not as high. They allowed her to choose her own interests and did not set the strict rules I faced. However, the most remarkable difference was how our parents celebrated our achievements. When I accomplished something significant, it was usually met with a nod of approval or a short acknowledgement, whereas my sister's achievements were celebrated by the whole family as if it were some grand event. These differences left me feeling confused. I could not understand how the same parents could approach raising their children so differently. It was not easy growing up in an atmosphere of constant criticism, while watching my sister enjoy a more carefree childhood. Nevertheless, I consciously tried not to feel resentment toward my sister, knowing she was not responsible for our parents' decisions. Despite all the difficulties, I continued to support my sister and tried to be a positive example for her. As a result, we managed to keep a warm relationship and always stayed close. 6 years later, everything changed when my brother was born. Our parents threw a real feast celebrating the birth of their long-awaited son. From the day he was born, it was obvious he received special treatment. He had expensive clothes, expensive toys, and an amazing room that looked much better than the ones my sister and I had. Our parents did everything possible for him, buying him the best stroller and an expensive crib. It was not only about material things. My younger brother received much more attention. Our parents took lots of photos and filmed videos of his every achievement, but when it came to me and my sister, there was no such excitement. Even in everyday matters, our parents were much more involved in his life. They never missed a doctor's appointment for him. They were always there. For me and my sister, Grandma and Grandpa played a much more significant role, especially after our brother was born. This inequality did not end when my brother grew older. My brother was excused from many household chores that my sister and I were obliged to do. His birthdays and holidays turned into grand events with luxurious gifts and parties. As you can guess, this made my sister and me constantly feel unwanted. Honestly, by that point, I was already used to such treatment, but for my sister, it was the first time she experienced what I went through in childhood. We began spending much more time at Grandma and Grandpa's. We spent countless days playing in their garden or sitting by the fireplace, listening to their stories. We shared with them our fears, dreams, and difficulties we faced at home. Grandma always assured us that we were not alone. When I was a teenager, my parents labeled me a rebel because my views differed from theirs. When I tried to explain my point of view, my mother usually started crying and saying I caused her stress. If I expressed sadness or anger around her, my mother would start yelling at me and say she could not be near me in that state, after which she would simply ignore me for several hours. When my sister grew older, she began to show her individuality, but faced mental health problems. For many years, my mother refused to send her to treatment because, in her opinion, my sister did not need it. However, when my sister had panic attacks or anxiety episodes, my mother told her she was inconveniencing her. One night, the situation at home became especially bad. Our parents kept repeating how much of a disappointment my sister and I were and that we should never have been born. It felt like we were drowning in their cruel words, and we could no longer bear it. Feeling lost and hurt, my sister and I decided to leave home. We packed our things and went straight to Grandma and Grandpa's. When they found out where we were, our parents came to them and demanded that we return home. Grandma scolded them for treating us that way, and my father replied that he had provided us with food and a roof over our heads. What more did we need? Hearing this, my grandfather, who was usually calm and composed for the first time in his life, truly got angry and raised his voice. He told my father he should be ashamed of how he treated his children. He threatened that if my father ever did anything to harm us again, he would call Child Protective Services. This really scared our parents because my brother was still young, and they were afraid of losing him. Grandpa continued to defend us, saying we deserved better parents. I clearly remember how he told my mother that she was his daughter, but he had never treated her the way she treated us. My mother's face turned red with shame. That argument at Grandma and Grandpa's became a turning point because for the first time someone stood up for us, and it changed a lot. After that night, the situation at home changed a little. Our parents, especially my father, were clearly frightened by Grandpa's threats and began to behave a bit calmer. My brother still received special attention, but yelling and punishment for my sister and me became less frequent. When I turned 18, I really wanted to go to university, but my parents were strongly against it. We had a big fight. My mother insisted that as a girl, I should focus on marriage and having children. She said men do not like overly educated women. My father supported her, mocking the idea of getting an education and saying I would never need it. It was very painful to hear my own parents discourage me from independence just because I was a girl. Despite their protests, I immediately enrolled in university. I received a scholarship because I was selected for an honors program, so my parents did not have to pay for my studies. They were furious that I had disobeyed them, but I didn't care. I started working part-time while studying and saved money. That period of my life became a turning point. I learned to handle adult responsibilities and for the first time tasted independent life. Balancing studies, work, and personal life was not easy, but it made me stronger and more independent. During all this time, my parents rarely called me to ask how I was doing. Eventually, I graduated from university and got a full-time job. Thanks to my part-time work during my studies, I had saved enough money to rent an apartment with roommates. My communication with my parents became rarer, almost non-existent. And it was not just me. It seemed they were quite comfortable with this distance too. Birthdays and holidays passed with rare formal greetings. There were moments when life hit me especially hard. Problems at work, relationship failures, and my first impulse was to turn to my family. But every time I stopped myself, knowing they didn't care. The thought of going back to the emotional roller coaster I had experienced with my parents was unbearable. Soon, it became a conscious decision to completely cut them out of my life. The only family member I kept in regular contact with was my sister. When it was her turn to go to university, our parents threatened to kick her out of the house if she decided to continue her education. That's when I offered her to move in with me. I needed to make sure she could follow her dream and build her future without our parents' restrictions. My sister moved in with me and began studying at a local college. I worked hard to support both of us. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to support her education and help her achieve her goals. During this period, our bond grew even stronger, and I found comfort in knowing that despite our difficulties with our parents, I could create a safe and supportive environment for my sister where she could grow and thrive. When our brother grew up, he did not face the same difficulties as my sister and I. Our parents proudly sent him to university. Moreover, they had saved enough money for him to study without financial struggles. Our brother clearly received opportunities and privileges that we never had. I couldn't help but feel mixed emotions, joy for him and sadness from the stark contrast in our upbringing. Nevertheless, my sister and I continued to support each other, firmly determined to overcome all the challenges we faced in childhood. Throughout all the ups and downs, our grandparents remained a constant source of support for us. All these years, they kept in touch with us, visiting whenever they could. A few years ago, our beloved grandmother passed away, and my sister and I hurried home to support our grandfather. That meeting was the first time in a long while that I saw our parents. They greeted me with nothing more than a nod. Seeing their coldness, I barely held back tears. At that moment, I felt especially vulnerable, but I didn't want my mother to scold me for making a scene. After our grandmother's death, my sister and I began visiting our grandfather more often. Despite our busy schedules, we always found time to be with him. We regularly went to see him, often having lunch together or just sitting on the porch, talking about childhood memories and recent events. On weekends, we would spend entire days helping him around the house and walking together in the local park. During one of our shared lunches, our grandfather expressed pride in the fact that I take care of my younger sister. His words caught me off guard, and I was genuinely surprised by such recognition. He went on to say that he was proud to have a granddaughter like me, and that he believed in my potential to change the world. Although I knew these were just words, I was overwhelmed with emotion and tears welled up in my eyes. It had been many years since anyone had sincerely appreciated me. Grandfather gently patted me on the head and assured me that my sister was very lucky to have such an older sister as me. The pride shining in his eyes is an image forever imprinted in my memory. Our brother, who had always been the parents' favorite, kept his distance, perhaps afraid that they would abandon him just as they had once rejected us. Over the last few years, my sister and I rarely spoke to him, hearing from relatives and cousins about the many things our parents had done for him while completely ignoring us. They bought him several used cars, paid the down payment on a house, so he could move out and live on his own, and last year even paid for a trip to New York with his girlfriend so he could rest, because, according to them, he had been working too hard. Recently, my sister, who had been dating her boyfriend Robert, 29 since college, got engaged. The news filled me with immense joy, and I was happy for her. She and Robert are a wonderful couple, and their love is evident in every glance and smile they share. The proposal was truly magical, and my sister was over the moon, proudly showing off the beautiful ring on her finger to anyone who wanted to share in her happiness. She posted engagement photos on social media, allowing relatives to learn about it and start calling with congratulations. The news must have eventually reached our parents. Our phones were literally blowing up with calls and messages. It was surprising. Until that moment, they had shown little interest in our lives. We wondered why they suddenly wanted to be part of our happiness when they had kept their distance for so long. These messages left us with mixed feelings, shock, confusion, and perhaps a little irritation. Why now? Why choose to interfere at the very moment we were happy? Caught off guard by this sudden wave of attention, my sister and I exchanged puzzled glances. When my sister finally answered our mother's call, Mom began enthusiastically talking about how happy she was for her. My sister, being polite, thanked her. Then came the tricky part. Mom began asking all sorts of questions. She wanted to know who Robert was and whether they could meet him. Knowing our parents and their past behavior, my sister tried to avoid answering, citing her busy schedule and the chaos of wedding preparations. But my father, who was likely sitting next to Mom, interrupted the conversation. He insisted that they had the right to meet the man their daughter was going to marry. Their persistence had an effect, and my sister eventually agreed. My sister didn't want to meet our parents alone, so she told them she would take me with her. To our surprise, our parents agreed. This was a bit unexpected, but we decided to go along. On the appointed day, we nervously went to our parents' house. The atmosphere was tense from the very start. They greeted us with forced smiles, trying to act as if everything was fine. Mom smiled at Robert, and we sat down at the table to talk. It was awkward to see our parents after so many years, especially watching them try to pretend we were a happy family in front of Robert. Though I'm sure Robert knew the whole story, he had been with my sister since college and had been by her side for so long. Sensing the awkwardness, Robert tried to lighten the mood by talking about himself, his job, and his hobbies. The conversation soon shifted to the upcoming wedding. That's when things got interesting. Our parents began subtly hinting at how wonderful it would be if Dad walked my sister down the aisle and Mom played an important role in the ceremony. My sister and I exchanged puzzled glances. Dad went on to say that it was important to show family unity to the relatives to avoid awkward questions. Mom nodded, adding that they didn't want Robert's family to think my sister had no parents, so they needed to be present at the wedding in an important role. Hearing their words, my sister and I exchanged glances again. Now it became clear why they had invited us. They were afraid my sister wouldn't invite them to the wedding and didn't want relatives asking uncomfortable questions that could damage their reputation. I shook my head in disbelief, realizing their true motive. My sister politely thanked them for the offer, but calmly stated that she had already decided who would walk her down the aisle. Dad curiously asked who she had chosen for such an important role. My sister smiled confidently and said, "Grandpa will walk me down the aisle." Our parents looked shocked, trying to hide their surprise. Their expressions quickly changed from expectation to anger. They found it hard to accept that their daughter had chosen her grandfather instead of them for such a meaningful role. The conversation then went something like this. Mom: "But dear, traditionally the father walks the daughter down the aisle. You can't break tradition." Sister: "You know what, Mom? I don't care about traditions. I want Grandpa to be part of this special moment. He was there for us when you both forgot you had daughters. You can attend the wedding only as guests, like any other relatives." Dad: "You can't just push us aside. We're your parents." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back my laughter and burst out laughing. Everyone was clearly shocked by my reaction. I looked my father straight in the eye and said that he and Mom had long forgotten they were our parents and had treated us like trash all these years. Therefore, they had absolutely no right to demand that my sister listen to them. This truth hit hard, and our parents, angry and ashamed, fell silent. My sister stood her ground, saying they couldn't suddenly claim parental rights after ignoring us for so many years. I backed her up, adding that their actions had consequences and they couldn't rewrite the past. My sister made it clear that our parents' role at the wedding would be limited, just like any other guests. They could attend, but their involvement would be minimal. The meeting ended on a bitter and tense note, but my sister did not back down from her decision. As we left, I felt both admiration for my sister's courage and disappointment that our parents still didn't understand the consequences of their actions. Since that meeting, we've been bombarded with calls and messages from our parents and other relatives accusing us of being selfish and cruel for not letting our father walk my sister down the aisle. Update 1. A few hours have passed since posting the story, and the support we've received has been incredible. For everyone asking about our grandfather, my sister has already told him about the engagement, and he congratulated her warmly. However, he still doesn't know she wants to ask him to walk her down the aisle. We want to tell him in person to see his reaction. We plan to visit him this weekend. As for our parents, they keep sending us angry messages. Dad even found a way to write to Robert on Facebook. In a long message, he demanded that Robert talk sense into my sister because, in his opinion, as the man in the relationship, Robert should take control of the situation. Dad wrote that my sister had no right to ask Grandpa because, by tradition, that role belongs to the father. In the end, he threatened Robert, saying that if he allowed my sister to go through with it, he and Mom wouldn't come to the wedding. Robert calmly replied, "My fiancée will do what she wants, and I fully support her. Whether you come to the wedding or not is your choice." I'm sure Robert's clarity and confidence hit Dad like a bombshell. He probably expected a more submissive answer. I can even imagine the look on his face, and it makes me smirk. The next update will be after our visit to Grandpa this weekend. Update 2. This weekend, my sister and I went to see Grandpa. We were full of joyful excitement and couldn't wait to share the important news with him. Finally, my sister said she wanted to tell him something important. Grandpa looked at us, his eyes full of curiosity and warmth. My sister took a deep breath and said, "I want you to walk me down the aisle. You've always been there for us, and I can't imagine anyone else doing it." Grandpa's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged my sister tightly. His voice trembled with emotion as he said it would be a great honor for him. Looking at Grandpa, I couldn't hold back my own tears, and we all hugged. Grandpa kept thanking my sister, saying how much her request meant to him. We assured him it was the least we could do to thank him for all the love and support he had given us over the years. Then we told him how we had informed our parents and how they reacted. We worried that they might take their anger out on Grandpa, but he just chuckled. He assured us he could handle our mother just fine, and that nothing would stop him from walking my sister down the aisle. My sister breathed a sigh of relief, and we spent the evening helping Grandpa around the house. As my sister's wedding day approached, we were completely immersed in preparations. I can't wait for the moment when I see my beautiful sister saying yes to the love of her life. Update 3. 3 months have passed since my last update. Sorry for the delay, but I've been busy with my own life. The wedding day finally arrived, and it exceeded all my sister's dreams and expectations. The venue looked stunning, just as we had planned. Guests filled the hall, and the air was filled with joy and anticipation. However, one absence was especially noticeable: our parents. After we decided to limit their role at the wedding, they chose not to come. We respect their choice. The ceremony itself was magical. My sister, glowing in her wedding dress, stood beside Grandpa. In his eyes, there was love and pride as they walked down the aisle together. Choosing Grandpa for this important role was absolutely the right decision, and my sister's joy only confirmed it. The atmosphere was filled with warmth, laughter, and shared happiness among all present. My sister and Robert exchanged vows, promising each other eternal love and support. The celebration continued late into the night, with dancing, laughter, and heartfelt toasts. After the wedding, life returned to normal. My sister and I made a conscious decision to block our parents so they could no longer interfere in our lives with their negativity and drama. We still regularly visit Grandpa, spending as much time with him as possible. This journey has been difficult, but we want only those who truly care about us to be in our lives. Well, that's all. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and good luck.